morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Ms. Cenac and Ms. Semino and all of you guys for having us here. It's really an honor to be here. My daughter's a ragdoll as well, so a bunch of ragdolls around. Anyway, I want to take you guys back in history a little bit, back to 1950s, 1960s, and take you up to the Northeast. There's a small island off of the coast of New York and Connecticut called Plum Island. And back in the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 1960s, the government was performing a lot of experiments there using insects and anything that they could use to try to create bioweapons that they could drop on during wartime. And one of the creatures they were using were ticks. And the security on the island got kind of lapsed as it went along, and animals got off the island carrying the ticks. And fast forward to 1975, and in a small town about a mile across Long Island Sound from Plum Island, there's a town called Old Lyme, Connecticut. And in the summer of '75, 39 kids got sick with, they didn't know what it was. It was just high fevers, joint involvement, just different symptoms, and they never could figure out at that time what was going on. So fast forward in the early 80s, and a scientist finally discovered the bacteria that was causing this trouble, and hence it was called Lyme disease, because it originated in Old Lyme. And from that time on, it's just spread exponentially, just all over the United States. The officials expect probably 500,000 new cases every year as it stands right now, because it continues to spread. And the genie's out the bottle and can't put him back in. So that brings me up to my personal experience with Lyme disease. It started in 1996. I was on a camping trip in the DeSoto National Forest in southern Mississippi. I got back, and about 5 days later at the hospital, I was sitting at my desk, and I felt something on my neck, and I couldn't get it off. It was hard to get off. I didn't know what it was. So finally wrestled it off. It was a tick. And I knew nothing about Lyme disease at the time, very little to nothing, and didn't know much about ticks, and I just went about my business. And if I would have gone to the doctor at that time and gotten a few rounds of antibiotics, I would have been good to go. I mean, it would kill it while it's still in your blood, but when it gets beyond a month or two, it starts to migrate into different organ systems, and it got to be where I eventually started having trouble with irregular heartbeats. I had numbness in my hands and my feet, a lot of joint pain, extreme fatigue. So it was like different systems with me. With Jessica, it was neurological. It went straight to her nervous system. And because of this, I had to retire from respiratory therapy in 2012. It took about a year and a half. By the way, Jessica and I both got ill the same month of the same year. We both got sick in November of 2010. And it took a year and a half for me to get properly diagnosed, and 3 years for Jessica to get diagnosed. Because there's a lot of denial about where Lyme disease happens, if it happens up north or if it happens. But it's everywhere now. It's just everywhere. So anyway, I had to retire in 2012, and after a year or so after retirement, I figured, what am I going to do with myself? And I enjoyed screenwriting. I had written a couple of screenplays previously, and so I decided to chronicle my experiences with the misdiagnosis and all the things I went through into a screenplay. So I started writing, but God had other plans. Probably about halfway through my script, a friend of mine who's a deacon at a local church, pulled me on the side and he said, I know you can write, and I know what you've been going through, and I want to tell you about a couple that I counseled for marriage. He wouldn't give me their names. He was respecting their privacy, so he would not give me the names. He just told me their story. And I thanked him for it, and I went ahead and said, well, maybe I'll write it into the script. Maybe I can write it into the script. It's such an inspiring story that he told me. So this is where it gets really like God tapping you on the shoulder. Went about my business, continued writing. About 3 or 4 months later, when you get old, like me, you get these cards in the mail from funeral homes asking you to go to a pre-planning seminar. My wife and I decided we better start doing this because we're not getting any younger. So we went to a pre-planning seminar, and They show a film, they give you a meal, and they give a little talk, and then they assign a sales representative to you who will come to your house and go over different funeral plans and so on. A young man named Sean came out to our house, and we sat down at the table, and my wife hadn't finished getting ready, so he and I were just chatting, and I related to him what I'd gone through with Lyme disease, and I told him the story that the deacon had told me about the couple that he married, and his eyes got big, and he said, "That's Lance and Jessica Lasiter. They're very good friends of mine." And at this point, it's got, not tapping, pounding me on the shoulder, you know, you got to, this is what you have to do. So I knew at that point, I asked him, could I get a meeting with them? I would really like to talk to them. And I knew God was asking me to change directions on the screenplay and to write their story instead of my story. So he set up a meeting. Lance and I met for coffee. He wanted to kind of check me out to see who I was, and I respect him for that. And when he found out it was harmless, he went ahead and he invited me over to meet Jessica. So we sat down and talked, and I told them the vision of what I had of writing a screenplay on their story, and they talked about it. They decided we'll give it a try. You know, there's no guarantees that it was going to go anywhere. You can write a script, but for it to get, it's a long way from a script to the silver screen. So anyway, we started meeting on a weekly basis, and we did this for probably 2.5 years. Every week we'd meet. Even during COVID, we'd do it by telephone. And I would learn more about them, and I would write as we were going along. And who I met was a totally inspirational, faith-filled couple who loved each other so much. And in fact, the whole faith-filled family. And we continued writing for 2.5 years. At the end of the 2.5 years, I had a script that was fairly decent. It needed more work on it, but it was about as far as we could go. And I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to come back later and tell you more about the film project, but I'm going to turn over to Lance. He has some things to share about he and Jessica.